Oh, go ahead, Peter.
To follow up on that, President Biden is a lawyer. Is he
And
concerned?
the President of the United States and the Commander-in-Chief, but go ahead.
He is, but as a lawyer, is he concerned at all that a local DA indicting a former president could, down the line, open up the possibility, set the precedent, that local DAs that don't like former President Biden could indict him?
I'm not going to comment from here.
Why don't you have more to say about the Trump indictment?
It is an ongoing case, and I've been very clear about that. We've been prudent about that, not commenting on ongoing cases, and we're going to stick to that.
But for
Peter?
better or worse, all that anybody in the country is talking about at this exact moment while we were in here is Trump. And they look here to find out what the White House thinks about it, and
Well, I think the American people should feel reassured that when there is an ongoing case like this one, that we're just not commenting.
And so, does the lack of comment mean that you do not think anything happening in New York today is one of the top issues facing the country at the moment?
That's your assessment. That's not my assessment. I'm just laying out the facts that we are just not going to comment on an ongoing case from here. And we've been very consistent, we've been very prudent, and we're going to stick there.
So the worst press secretary in the history of our country has absolutely nothing to say about what's going on, even getting pressed repeatedly by Peter DOOCY. So she tries to move on, but guess what? The room won't have it. This specific reporter next refuses to let her get off the hook easily. Check this out.
The president has spoken repeatedly about January 6th. He gave at least two major speeches that I can think of, and he's talked at length in various forums. There were more than 500 active legal cases going on during the time that he made those speeches, all of which potentially could have been affected, would have been affected by whatever his opinions were on the circumstances surrounding those cases. What is different between his being willing to talk about not the specifics of individual cases, but to talk about the issues presented by what happened on January 6th, and questions about, just to put a fine point on it, I'm sort of going on Peter's point, it's like, and frankly, a lot of the questions here, there's an understanding about not wanting to comment specifically about this case, perhaps, but there are issues that are presented. People have been talking about them for weeks now, when a former president, any former president, would be indicted for the first time and arrested for the first time. What is the White House's reticence, and what's the difference between that and this?
But with all seriousness, January 6th was a devastating day. Like, you guys, I think if you guys weren't there, some of your colleagues were on Capitol Hill. We had law enforcement, police officers who were attacked, who died. And what we saw on that day was an attack on our democracy. It was a devastating, devastating day in our history. And it was a moment for this president to have spoken to, right? You had millions and millions of Americans who watched what was happening on Capitol Hill, something that many of us, I've never seen it, and many of us had never ever seen before, you know? And it was something that needed to be spoken to. When you see something like that, our democracy, literally our democracy under attack. And so the president will never shy away when it comes to our democracy, when it comes to the fabric of who we are as a country and what makes this country what it is. And so it was a different moment and a different time. I hear.
Follow up.
I know, but let me.
Sure, go ahead.
When it comes to these types of cases, these criminal, specific cases, we're just not going to comment. I know there's a broad. I get you. I know there's a broader question of what this means, the precedent, and what the president is going to decide or make decisions that he might make, like hypothetical questions. I'm just not going to comment from here on that.
Again, I was asking why you weren't going to comment on from there.
I'm hoping that I laid that out for you, and I just laid out why we commented on January 6th, and we're just going to be very mindful. These are ongoing cases.
100 cases involving Americans whose freedom was at risk.
I hear you, but
right?
this is something that all of Americans watch in real time, and people died. People died.
Karine, I don't need a
People
lecture on
died.
the fact that
But you're
people
lecturing
died.
me.
Ooh, finally someone besides Peter DOOCY is getting sick of her crap. This little back and forth about lecturing each other is showing that the media is representing us to some degree of how frustrated we are with this administration. Look how upset they're getting that they are not getting answers from her. It's about time you guys got fired up about this.
But you're lecturing me.
But
you're lecturing me.
I'm not.
Yes, you are.
I'm asking questions, and what I'm saying is there are millions of people out there watching today. You called January 6th historic. It was absolutely historic, and none of us had ever seen that before. Nobody's seen this before either. There are millions and millions of Americans watching the first time in 250 years a former president be hauled into court and processed for arrest. That means something. That has some effect, potentially, I suspect, on American democracy and on how the rest of the world. The president has talked a lot about how the rest of the world sees the United States in the wake of January 6th. Totally valid. Why isn't there a similar kind of assessment about how the world is watching us now? Good or bad? I'm not making a judgment whichever way. I'm just saying.
And I hear your question. January 6th was a different moment. It just was. It was something that was incredibly devastating. People died on that day and were harmed. And it was just something that we saw visually, that we reacted to, and many people were scared in that moment. And as the president was taking office, as the next president of the United States, a president that ran on bringing the country together.
Yep, she just said that with a straight face.
On protecting our democracy.
With all his executive orders and with all this wasteful spending damaging our economy.
It was something that it was important to speak to at that moment. And also, we know that Americans still very much care about this. When it comes to a criminal investigation like this, that is ongoing, we are just not going to comment. We're not going to interfere. We're not going to politically interfere from here. And we've been consistent. We've been very consistent. I know you're bringing up January 6th. I just laid out why we believe that was very different. But we're just going to be consistent on not commenting on any criminal ongoing investigation.
Why don't you have more to say about the Trump
It
indictment?
is.